AGM, we will open the meeting with the election of a chair. Can I have nominations by show of hands, please? Councillor London.
I would like to nominate for a seventh year Andrew Smith. I know that only one person is allowed to nominate, but I'm sure that Phil would join me in that if it was possible. So I'd like to nominate Andrew. He's done a fantastic job over the last 6 years, and I'm sure he'll do the same going into his 7th matching gyms record.
Thank you. So I have a nomination for Councillor Andrew Smith. Councillor Smith, do you accept a nomination? Are there any other nominations? No? Okay, so I have just one nomination for Councillor Andrew Smith for chair, proposed by Councillor London. Those in favour? So that appears to be unanimous. Councillor Andrew Smith, would you now like to take the chair?
Thank you, members. Moving on to item 2 on the agenda, which is the nominations for. We have 2 vice chairs, and I'm personally delighted to nominate Councillor John London. John, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Thank you. And Councillor Bill Whitten, do you accept the nomination?
I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations, please? Sigh of relief. On that basis, then, could I see a show of hands in favour of Councillor John London, please? Any against?
So that is 15 votes in favour and 1 abstention.
Thank you, Claire. And could I see a show of hands in favour of for Councillor Phil Whitten, please? Any against?
So that is 14 votes in favour and 2 abstentions.
Thank you, Claire.
With apologies. So both Councillor London and Councillor Whittam are now vice chairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Before we just move on to the formal agenda, I just got a few remarks I would like to make, which is first and foremost to say good morning and a warm welcome to the Development Control Committee meeting today, the 4th of June 2025. But I'd like to draw your attention to the following items, please. Can I ask that all phones are either silent, in flight mode, or in switched off? And just to remind people that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. So if any member of the public attending the meeting objects to being filmed, please advise us immediately, and we will ensure that they are not included in the filming. Although I stress the public gallery will not feature in the live stream, and the public speakers will only be filmed from behind where they are seated, and their faces will not be visible. So can I just check if there's anybody who objects to? Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much indeed. And members, I do say this frequently, but I don't really want to go over the operation of the Q to Speak system, but there is a card that apparently was produced for full council, which is actually, which is actually now available to you all. So But in a sense, just press to speak, and you will appear on by magic on my screen. Okay, so we move on. Could I have apologies for absence, please, Helen?
Chair, we have apologies for absence from councillors Ian Holder and Andy Neal.
Thank you, Helen. And are there any substitutes, please? Councillor Taylor. Thank you very much. Councillor Lynch. Thank you very much indeed. So the minutes of the last meeting then, the meeting was held on the 7th of May 2025. Are there any comments or corrections that members have spotted? No one's indicating. So that's good for me, because there is actually a correction. Page 10, item 540, last sentence is a repeat of a sentence in the paragraph, so it's an emphasis that's not required. So could I ask that the last sentence of that paragraph is removed from the minutes? With that removal, could I see a proposer for the minutes, please? Councillor Whittam, and the seconder, Councillor Malmay-White. Could I see a show of hands in favour of approval?
Thank you. That appears to be unanimous, and the minutes are approved.
Thank you, Claire. Item 6 is the normal declarations of interest, which I read out for clarity. And members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest, other registerable or non-registerable interest, which they have in any item of business on the agenda, and that should be no later than when the item is reached and when appropriate to leave the meeting prior to discussion and voting on the item. Are there any declarations at this point? No, no one's indicating. That's fine. In which case, I'll move swiftly on to item 7, which is the application to be considered for the former Sports Direct Fitness Centre in Easley Road, Bury St Edmunds. So Gareth, it's over to you, and begin your presentation when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This is a planning application for the change of use of a commercial premises on the Moreton Hall Industrial Estate in Bury St Edmunds. If you're not familiar with Bury St Edmunds, it's the industrial estate that sits behind the Sainsbury's supermarket, sort of wedged in between Sainsbury's on one end and Matalan on the other. I'll just show you here on the smaller plan here. So this is the industrial estate. This is housing on the opposite side. This is the main through road from the A14 that serves Moreton Hall. And you have the former home-based building here and the other retail buildings and a terrace here behind the car park. Sainsbury's is actually just off shot, and you can see the A14 just at the bottom. So this is the former Sports Direct premises. It was a gymnasium with a swimming pool. It's in this secondary location on the industrial estate, so it's served by the sort of the ring road that runs off the main road. This is a block plan of the layout of the site as it exists at the moment. You can see the building in the centre, or relatively centralised within the site, surrounded on all sides by car parking and access roads. So the proposal is to change the use of this former gym and swimming pool building into a builder's merchant. So there's the existing plan again, which shows the existing landscaping in more detail. You can see the areas of hard standing around the edge and the building in this location here. Floor plans as existing or as previously used. You have the gymnasium, reception area, changing facilities, and in this location, the swimming pool. There's a mezzanine as exists at first floor level as well, which is on the other plan there. Some photographs of the site from the highway. So this is the frontage of the building. Obviously, all the livery from the previous user has been removed from the building and the site, and it's currently being used for parking of cars, I believe, for other commercial units in the area. And there's the access down the side of the building. Again, there's the frontage to the side. So again, you can see the extent of car parking and manoeuvring that exists on the site. And to the rear and the access down the opposite side. So there's the access point onto the road. So this is the originally submitted plan. So the change of use, obviously the footprint of the building stays the same. Included in the application are proposals for new 2.4 metre high security fences and gates. You can see those with the blue lines in this location here off the access. So the circulation would remain around the building, and then a secondary area to enclose the compound in this location. That was as originally proposed. Officers were concerned about the visual impacts of the fencing being so close to the back of the existing landscaping at the front. So on this photograph, you can see between the blue cars and the two red cars there, that's where the fencing would have been proposed. So we secured some amendments to that to bring the fence back in line with the frontage of the building. And the existing car parking situation in that location would then stay as is. Proposed floor plan. So you can see the storage area for building materials, small shop area, and then an office and reception area. And again, the mezzanine would be utilised by staff. There are some incidental changes to the elevations of the building. These are shown on the drawing, so there are insertion of new windows and doors, for example, but these were not considered to materially affect the external appearance of the building, and therefore did not require planning permission, and were not included, therefore, as part of the plan application, other than as illustrations. So you will note some of these changes on the elevations, but the elevations essentially remain as is with those changes to windows and door details. You can see them with the light blue colouring. So moving on from the plans and photographs, you have your late papers, which were circulated at the tail end of last week. And in particular, there are two issues covered in there. The first is the biodiversity net gain considerations. After the application was deferred from the meeting 2 months ago, in April, we detected there was an issue with the biodiversity net gain report that had been submitted with the plan application. So we took that time to rectify that error, and the assessment of that is now included in the late papers. And that points to mitigation being possible and can be secured on the site. So there are new trees to be planted to compensate for the loss of habitat, and also to provide the 10% increase from the baseline position. So that's all in the late papers. Post late papers, I do actually have two late representations. It says one on the screen, but I received one overnight. These are received from two local residents of the Moreton Hall estate, Michaela Dalton and Jana Kosikova. These raise similar issues to those which are already reported in your main papers from other representees. So we'll not read those out in detail, but just to point you to those relevant paragraphs in the main committee report. Finally, in the late papers, there is a changed recommendation from the main papers. So I'll come back to that later. So I just advise you to keep the late papers to hand when we come to the end of the presentation. So in terms of the substance of the plan application, this is discussed obviously at length in the main report. We have policies in our local plan, existing and emerging, that relate to allocated employment land. Moreton Hall is one of our allocated employment sites. And the policies seek to protect employment land in employment use, and obviously bring back employment land that's been lost to other users into employment use in such locations similar to Moreton Hall. We also have policies that relate to protection of recreational facilities. We obviously had a gym and swimming pool facility on the site. We have policies that protect those from loss to other users, and similarly a policy that acts in a similar way for community facilities. So the gym and swimming pool facility would act or double up as a recreational facility and a community facility. So we have protectionist policies in all three of those areas, which between employment land and the recreational and community facilities policies, there is a bit of a jar between trying to get an employment use back into the site and at the same time protecting a recreation and community facility use. But members are not asked to judge between those policies, the weighting of those relevant policies, because all of them require, first of all, the proposed use doesn't fit neatly into an employment use. It's not a recreational facility and it's not a community facility. So the proposed use actually is contrary technically to all three policies. And before all of those policies, before those relevant uses are lost to alternative uses, such as the builders merchants that's proposed, they all require a period of marketing to demonstrate that the building is no longer required for the use that it's currently operating in. So the key point in this application is therefore the marketing of the site and whether that meets with our policies. So we'll go on to just go through that. Now, in our emerging local plan, we have in one of the appendices some guidance for developers about how to go about complying with our requirements for marketing of premises. So what I've got here is a copy of that guidance. It's also in your committee report. But I do ask members to bear in mind that there is no similar guidance in the extant local plan. The applicant would therefore have to discuss this with officers with no formal guidance in the plan to help them in that way. The applicant started the marketing about a year before this guidance was published. So it had already been on the market for a year before the guidance was published. So in some respects, it can't be consistent with it. And I'll come on to that in a moment. So this is what the emerging guidance says. So it's not policy, it's guidance in the emerging plan. The council require the applicant to submit evidence that the marketing exercise has been undertaken for a minimum of 12 months. This site has been on the market for approximately 2 years. So it's actually doubled the minimum amount of time required. So in terms of the exercise, we would expect the applicant to meet the following requirements, and I've bullet pointed these on the next few slides. So the use of a reputable local or national agent. They've used Collier's CRE, who have a proven track record in commercial buildings. So the applicant meets this requirement. There's evidence of a visible letting advert on the property or the site through the entire marketing period. Now, this is where the applicant hasn't met that requirement. There hasn't been a board displayed on the site advertising the property for sale or let. But officers, as you note in the report, officers do not consider that to be a reason to reject their marketing campaign, particularly because the nature of the proposed use, which is really specialist, is a gymnasium use. There are a number of specialist national operators who may or may not be interested. In this case, the applicant's agent, Colliers, approached those operators directly to see if they would be interested in taking the property. And there was no interest generated in response to that campaign. So the officers do not consider that the display of an advertising board would actually have added anything to what the agent did. It's a secondary location. There wouldn't be very much passing traffic. And with obviously the internet and the way into the internet is used to advertise properties, it's far more likely that somebody would pick up the advert on the internet than they would driving past the site. So officers did not consider that to be a major flaw with the marketing campaign. Marketing materials be published on an agreed online property database. They were on Rightmove and Collier's own website. Materials must only be advertised for existing lawful use. So it did actually major on the existing use as a gym and swimming pool, but it does allow for potential other uses that are unrelated to existing lawful use, which so that if they accord with policies and the development plan. So that opens up the marketing to, for example, other employment uses, because we have policies that promote employment uses at this site. The applicant did have that flexibility. They did focus their campaign on a gym and swimming pool, but they did say other uses would be considered. But again, through the campaign, which is now 2 years old, nothing came forward. The advertised rental or sale price should be reasonable, evidenced with marketing rents within the local area and the condition of the property. So members will recall this application was deferred from the meeting in April this year, and that was to allow the advertised rental to be checked. We received advice in the run-up to the committee that the advertised price may be high, particularly when compared to other rentals that have been achieved in the area for different uses, employment uses. So we asked the applicant for further evidence to clarify the rental, to justify the rental that they've been seeking. And the response to that is set out in the appendix to your report. It's the letter from Colliers. That letter was made subject to consultation with our estates team, our estate surveyors team, who provided comments in response and accepted that the marketing campaign was reasonable. Those comments are set out in the consultation responses summaries in your main report. So again, this aspect of the guidance is considered to be complied with. The lease terms should be attracted to the market. Flexible terms should be considered that would be accommodating the needs of potential occupiers. I've just covered that point. A commentary on the number of inquiries made on the property or land, including details of the number of viewings, rent at the time of the inquiry, details of the inquiry and the reasons given for why interest was not pursued. And we had all of that in the marketing report that the applicant provided to us. And finally, in the case of the property is in use, evidence will be required to demonstrate the tenant's intent to vacate the property. Marketing can commence from the notice of the tenant's intention to vacate the property. In this case, the previous tenant of the property, Sports Direct, left, and the applicant then very quickly placed the property back on the market to seek an alternative user. So again, this part of the guidance was complied with. So overall, we considered that the marketing was robust, was reasonable, and complied with our policies. So on those grounds, we consider that the proposed builder's merchant complies with our policies because of the marketing that's been undertaken. So we therefore recommend that planning permission is granted. Now, there is a change to the construction of the recommendation. That's in your late papers. At the end on page, I think it's 6, isn't it? No, it's before that because there's lots of conditions. Page 5. So it's recommended that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions which are listed in the late papers. They're all there, so you don't need to cross-reference to the main report. I just bring your notice to condition number 4, which relates to the biodiversity net gain requirements. That's the habitat management monitoring plan. There is a condition drafted for that, but there is discussion going on in the team at the moment about whether it's better and safer to secure that measure as part of a Section 106 agreement instead of a condition. But either way, if it's via a legal agreement, Section 106 agreement, or the condition, it will be secured in the format that's shown to you in the papers. It's just the way it's secured. Paragraph 13 does make provision for that by allowing for the head of planning to secure that condition through a Section 106, should she consider it necessary to do so. And that would be done before planning permission is granted. And obviously we'll carry on discussions with the applicant around that point. So that's my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Gareth. Right. I think Helen's going to be very busy on this item. I've got 2 registered objectors. John Spittle is a resident objector who submitted a statement to be read out by Helen. Melanie Soanes, who's given her apologies, she's chair of the Moreton Hall Residents Association, and she's also given Helen a statement to read out. The combined time for both of those is a maximum of 3 minutes in total. Then we've got Councillor Birgitta Major. She's one of the 3 ward members for Moreton Hall. She's sent a statement to Helen to read out. And we've got Dan Hewitt, I guess that's you, is it, Dan? Who is the agent for the development. So, Helen, we'll start the clock when you begin your speaking. Thank you.
I am objecting to the application to change the use of the gym to a builder's merchants for the following reasons. With regards to the comments in the application that the venue is not commercially viable as a pool/gym, has this statement been backed up with Sports Direct's audited accounts? When I was a member of the Sports Direct gym in 2023, the monthly cost for both the gym and the pool was £20 a month, which is at least half what other similar venues are charging. David Lloyd is £150 a month. Therefore, it seems logical that the venue would not make money as a gym if the owners were not charging the market rate. This facility is not just a gym, but also contains a large modern swimming pool, which, prior to its sudden closure, was used extensively by local residents. Whilst Bury is growing, there is insufficient swimming pool provision within the town, which will decrease further in the coming years as both the Leisure Centre and the Moreton Hall Health Club pools reach the end of their design service lives, and the new David Lloyd Centre is only for the rich minority. It is vital to teach swimming and water safety to children, and in the past this facility helped fulfil this need for local residents by hosting numerous lessons to all ages and abilities. As we look to tackle the growing obesity epidemic, it seems incredible to shut down what was a popular gym and pool, which enabled Bury residents to keep fit all year round, and replace it with yet another builder's merchant. Instead, the council should take over the facility as a gym and pool for the use of local residents. I fully object to the former Sports Direct facility being turned into a builder's merchant. The building, including a large open gym space with an excellent 20-foot pool, which was an excellent facility for the rapidly expanding Moreton Hall residential area with over 8,000 residents of all ages at present, and developing with over 1,000 homes in the next few months. Committee's decision turned this over twice, and the need for affordable leisure on Moreton Hall is even greater than it ever has been, and recognised by our councillors. This was pulled off the agenda on the 2nd of April 2025. With previously over 3,000 plus members of all ages supporting both physical and mental health, over 500 children/adults able to learn to swim through various swim schools and various exercise classes of mixed abilities, with the cost of living, leisure hubs support loneliness and build confidence, supported domestic abuse victims, disabled members and carers were able to use the facilities, excellent employment with over 25 jobs created at the previous facility, hours to suit working people, no booking systems, cost effective, reduced carbon footprint with residents able to walk and bike, including teenagers. I would also like to remind the committee of some of the council's strategic objectives: enable healthy lifestyles and foster healthy, safe and cohesive communities through good access to existing and planned community infrastructure, including cultural, leisure facilities and green spaces. Help tackle and reduce health inequalities and enable the provision of accessible facilities to improve residents' physical and mental well-being. Reduce the need for travel and make access to jobs, facilities and green space by public transport, walking and cycling safer and easier. In particular, there is a focus on the well-being of children and young people. The previous Sports Direct facility was of such a cost that it was accessible to children, young people and families. If this site is lost to a building merchant, is the council confident that there are sufficient accessible opportunities for the children/residents of Moreton Hall to develop the essential life-saving skill of learning to swim
Helen,
and improve
very sorry to
physical
interrupt
health?
you. Very sorry. Is there one sentence?
There you go, it's that one.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, and please take into account how beneficial these facilities would be to a lot of residents on Moreton Hall and surrounding villages if this was reinstated as a leisure/community complex.
Thank you, Helen. And your job isn't over yet. You are now going to present Birgitta Major's statement. Thank you.
Moreton Hall has grown by another 1,000 people if all new developments are taken into account, so pushing 8,000 residents. Huge amounts of material was produced at the last stage when the committee rejected change of use. I sincerely hope the committee will do so again. There is a clear need for affordable leisure activities in Moreton Hall. David Lloyd is not affordable to most. Underlying this is clearly the fact that Bury St Edmunds Town Council allocates tens of thousands of pounds annually of taxpayers' money towards such activities, of which swimming is by far the largest. The Builders Merchant home base has just been closed down, so why have another nonsensical application?
Thank you very much indeed, Helen, for that. So Dan, you've got 3 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm speaking as the planning consultant for the application and as a chartered member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. We're grateful for the case officer's detailed report, which contains an in-depth policy analysis, and we support the conclusions reached. The Sports Direct gym closed in summer 2023. The property has been vacant since then, generating 0 employment opportunities for the local community, whereas the proposed use will create around 25 new jobs. This is a private property and not a community-operated facility. A marketing exercise has been undertaken with gym operators directly contacted by the agents. As evidenced in our submissions, no operators expressed an interest due to the number of competing gyms in the town or the catchment size being too small to operate profitably. To respond to the comments we've just heard, it is unsurprising that some local residents would prefer a leisure facility, although a builder's merchant is a type of business which should be operating within this employment area and can be supported by adopted and emerging policies as set out in the officer's report. The closure of the Sports Direct gym nearly 2 years ago was clearly a shame and has left some of the members disappointed and distressed. I do not believe there is an appetite from the council to purchase the property and operate it alongside the Abercroft facility. If there is a perception that the local authority are not providing suitable leisure facilities for this part of the town, I do not believe it is appropriate for the debate to focus on this today. I would remind members that other gym facilities are available within the town. The following are within 5 miles of the property, accessible by public transport, and several are operated, importantly, by local independent businesses, which should be supported. Eventus 22, Bunting Road, 0.2 miles away. Revolution Fitness, Kempson Way, 0.5 miles away. Moreton Hall Health Club with a swimming pool, Mount Road, 1.1 miles away. Unit 1 Gym, 55 Eastern Way, 2.1 miles away. Skyliner Sports Centre, Skyliner Way, close to the site. The Gym Group, Bobby Retail Park, 2.6 miles. Fitter Bodies Gym, Thingo Hill, 2.7 miles. The Pilates Vault, Northgate Street. Bannertime Health Club and Spa with a swimming pool, Horinger Road, 3.1 miles. David Lloyd with a swimming pool, 1 Sandlands Drive, 3.9 miles. Abercroft Leisure Centre, Beaton's Way, with a swimming pool, 3.9 miles. The Health Hub with a swimming pool, All Saints Resort, Fornham St Genevieve, 4.1 miles. Iron Island Limited, Miro House, Western Way, 4.9 miles. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Dan, and to all the speakers. So, time for the committee discussion and debate. Which member's going to open up? Because you've delayed, Councillor London was just slightly ahead of you. So, Councillor London first.
As no one else was going at the time, I thought I'd ask one small question, which is, I noticed the marketing seems to have focused on lease. Was the site marketed for sale? And I'm just aware of other facilities where it's that 1 year of marketing has been focused mostly on the sale of the site. Is focusing solely on lease within the parameters of our policy?
Yeah, thank you. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Let's see what other questions we've got first, Gareth. I know you were eager to respond. Councillor Chester, please.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of employment value in planning policies, what's considered the greater, retail or industrial? And by comparison, if you have those figures, what's the employment history of the site to date? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chester. Councillor Miller-Jones, please.
Thank you. The main thing I just wanted to say actually was just that I've noticed a typo on page 25 that I think may be a bit of an issue because it completely changes the meaning of what it says, which is where it says, it seems likely that the high quoting rent would necessarily put off an interested party. And I think it's supposed to say not necessarily. And I just wanted to point that out because it completely changes the meaning of that whole paragraph. I agree with all the residents who say it would be better to have a leisure facility. But if it's been marketed for 2 years and no one will take it, I just wonder what can we do about that? It's unfortunate, but if they've met that requirement of a year, and they've actually doubled that requirement, I don't know, from a material point of view, I assume that we can't ask more than that, even if we would prefer it to stay as a leisure facility.
Thank you, Councillor Miller-Jones. Councillor Malmay-White, please.
Thank you. Was this offered directly to Abercroft Leisure, do we know? The lease of? It's a real dilemma, this one, because it's completely bonkers. We're building fast food outlets on every roundabout into Bury St Edmunds. We know we've got an obesity crisis, and yet we're closing a leisure facility. But that said, it's a private leisure facility. We're not in the business of telling businesses what they can do and what they can't do. And having been marketed for 2 years, I do understand that our hands are tied. But, I mean, this just sums up Britain, doesn't it? Buy a hamburger, but don't go to the gym or swim. Treat your children to a McDonald's, but don't take them swimming because there's nowhere to swim. It drives me mad. But that is not a planning issue, sadly. So I can have my rant, but in planning terms, I feel that my hands are tied, really. But it's very, very disappointing. Given the growth of Thurston, the growth of the Morton Hall area, you would have thought that it would be possible to support a small swimming pool in this area. But I think it is the swimming. It's the swimming pool that is such a cost to these gyms. And that's why it's vitally important that we have our own council leisure facility for swimming, because there is no other place. A lot of private places don't let children swim, or they're only allowed to swim for a particular hour or something. So I think it's something this council has seriously got to look at, what the facilities are going to be for Bury St Edmunds in the foreseeable future. Because, as we know, we're constrained on each side by other councils who build up to our borders and then say, oh, well, never mind, they were going to Mid Suffolk for leisure. But no, they come to Bury St Edmunds. We know that. So, sorry for the rant, but I see no other way but to accept this because it has been marketed. It's been empty for 2 years, so obviously there's been no employment going on. I do not take the gentleman's view about increased employment because we obviously lost over 20 jobs by the closure of the gym. So actually we're only replacing like with like as far as employment goes. But sadly, I think I'm going to have to accept this recommendation. But thank you for listening to my rant.
Your rant very eloquent, Councillor Momoe. Thank you. But are you proposing approval? Are you proposing approval when you say accepting?
No, I don't wish to
Okay.
propose for approval, but as I said, I'll probably have to accept it when it comes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Ball, please.
Thank you. I too think it's extremely regretful if we do lose this swimming facility. But if you look at the marketing report and the work that's been done, there has been no interest. And as I think somebody has said, it is the swimming pool actually that makes it so expensive. I can't see any alternative. And if you did require it to be marketed longer, or you're trying to get another leisure people interested, that period, that property is going to deteriorate even more, and it's going to be even less attractive. And I think, regretful as it is, that this is the way it has to go, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. I'm going to go to officers now to respond. I've still got 3 members, Councillor Smith, Whittam and Sayer, to speak. So we'll get a mid response to some of the questions from Gareth. And over to you, Gareth.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. So the first point I picked up was it's been advertised for lease, but has been advertised for sale. The advert does only advertise for lease. It doesn't advertise for sale. But I think it's important to point out to members that had there been interest, the applicant would have had to have declared that interest, interest in a purchase of the property instead of a lease. They would have had to have declared that. But I think the salient point here is that all of the leading gym providers were approached directly by Colliers, and none of them showed an interest in leasing or purchasing the property. The guidance that I went through on screen earlier does say for lease or for rent. It doesn't say that, for lease or for sale. It doesn't say that it has to be advertised both ways. So it doesn't alter the conclusion, I think, that the marketing campaign has been reasonable. And then we had another question about which is the priority, employment or retail, and what's the planning history of the site. Well, the planning history of the site, before the gym, it was built as a factory, production of goods. It then became a gym. and it stayed as a gym operated by Sports Direct for several years. Obviously, that use has now ceased, and we're looking for the next user of the premises. In terms of favouring employment or retail, in terms of our policies on industrial estates, we would favour employment uses over retail uses. And if a retail user, retail operation was proposed on this site, we would require evidence that it's been marketed in the same way that we have done for the builder's merchant. And in terms of the error on page 25 of the main papers, this is in paragraph 13, comments attributed to West Suffolk Property Services. There's a second bullet point on page 25, and it's the third line up from the bottom of that second bullet point, where it says, it seems less likely that the high quoting rent would necessarily put off an interested party. It should actually say, it seems less likely that the high quoting rent would not necessarily put off an interested party. So thank you for clarifying that with us. And I think that's I don't think the final member had a question for me.
Thank you, Gareth. Right, Councillor David Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just pick up something on paragraph 67 of the report. It says, consider the application proposed comply with the requirements of policy DM41, which requires the applicant to demonstrate, that community facility is no longer needed. Surely, with all the objections we've had, this is needed. It is a needed facility in this part of the town and in the district as a whole. So I don't think that is strictly true what it says in the report there. And it would be, as people said, it would be a great shame to lose this facility in this part of the Bury. It is a much needed thing. The cynic in me wonders, well, if you've already got somebody who wants to come in, take it over as a builder's merchant, how hard are you going to push the marketing as a leisure centre? So, as I say, that's just cynic in me. You said something about it's a builder's merchant. Isn't that retail as well? So I think you said, I don't know, you said something about retail not being the same as employment land. But anyway, yeah, that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor David Smith. Councillor Phil Whittam, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a small question, really. Do we know why the last tenant, Sports Direct, actually left, sort of 2 years or so ago? And was that because it was not economically viable for them?
Thank you, Councillor Whittam. Councillor Sayer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a head and heart situation, really. We know that we would really like to keep these facilities, but it seems that everything is stacking up against it. We do need these facilities. It's a pity that the Moreton Hall residents, and there are a lot of residents up there with a lot of knowledge, I would think, amongst them, that I feel that the Moreton Hall residents have had 2 years to try and put forward a case, whether it's to the council or to anybody, to try and keep their facility, but they don't seem to have approached Abercroft or anything to try and keep this facility open. Unfortunately, I think the applicant has done everything possible to try and market this for rent, and with no other option, I think that we might have to allow this through. But it's really very much against what the residents want and what common sense in some ways tells us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sayer. Councillor London.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are sort of a quasi-judicial body here, so we have to operate within very strict parameters because this is planning law. And if we don't operate within those strict parameters, it can go to it can go outside of our control, and it can actually cost the taxpayer quite a lot of money if we decide to stray outside of those thin and narrow bounds. But there are things that the council can do. Unfortunately, not by the time it's got to this point. So I'd just like to ask, did any of the ward members ask for an ACV to be taken out on the site. Did Bury Town Council look at, or do we know if Bury Town Council looked at taking on the site? Had we, obviously, Abbeycroft doesn't own its own site, so it's not going to ask to purchase a site. But were there any communications from us to Abbeycroft about it? Would they be willing to take on the site if the council purchased it? I know that these are not material considerations, but I think that given the community interest in this and the fact that we are so within the rails on what we can and cannot do with this body, it's worth just publicly airing those other things that are possible, or at least were possible before it came to this body.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just, your well-meaning comments about costs associated with making an erroneous decision, they are definitely not material to the consideration. Councillor Glossop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to know, with the marketing campaign, it said that sports operators were contacted and no one showed any interest. Did they say the reasons for not wanting to take on this site? Because that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Because that would let us understand why we're in this position now. Because if all the sports operators have been contacted but no one wanted it, we need to know why. Because it's no good us trying to say we want to keep that facility there if specialists have not shown any interest. So I'd be interested to know if we've got that information, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glossop. I've got Councillor Malmay White, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't get an answer to my question whether we knew whether Abercroft Leisure had been approached directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malmay White. I've got Councillor Hood, and then we'll go back to officers, to discuss and respond to questions. Councillor Hood, please.
Thank you. So I take a slightly different view from some of the things that have been said. I think it's very clear there is huge community interest in keeping this facility for community use. I accept it's a privately owned facility, but we do have policies in this council that requires us to look after the well-being and the health of residents. And I wouldn't have thought it was beyond our capabilities to find reasons for not approving this change to a builder's merchant, particularly as the local councillors are opposing this, and apparently another local builder's merchant has recently closed. So my question is, given that it's not strictly in line with policy, as the planning officer explained, surely there are ways of not just approving this when we have such strong community representations against it. So I suppose my specific question is, given that this is not strictly in line with policy, can it not be interpreted in a different way? Because I won't be voting for this.
Thank you, Councillor Hood. Right, back to you, Gareth and Penny.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for missing the question about Abbeycroft. I'll start with that because I should have dealt with it already. Abbeycroft were not approached directly by the agent. They're obviously not one of the national operators. They are, quite a big local operator, obviously, in our patch and in other parts of Suffolk. So they weren't approached directly. The marketing campaign would have been known to them if they were interested in expanding their enterprises. They would have picked up on that through their own research. So the marketing would have covered that off. But in terms of Abbeycroft themselves, they're obviously not a commercial entity in the same way that other gym operators are. They're a not-for-profit organisation, and they tend to partner with owners and operators of gyms to run them for them, as opposed to running the facility all by themselves. So in terms of this specific site, Abbeycroft wouldn't be a neat fit for teaming up with the existing landowner, who obviously wants, who is an investor, obviously. So in terms of the other questions, is the community facility needed? Well, obviously there is a lot of call for the facility to be retained. We can't dismiss that and we shouldn't dismiss that. But the policy does deal with that in that it requires the site to be marketed to see if there is community interest coming from the community to take on the facility. So again, that marketing campaign didn't generate that interest either alongside any other employment or leisure uses. Is a builder's merchant retail? Yes and no is the answer to that. It's not an A1 retail use classified in planning terms, but it does sell stuff, and it does sell stuff potentially to members of the public. But it is it's a retail use, but it's also a storage and distribution use. The main bulk of the operation of a builder's merchant is to sell bulk building materials to builders and deliver them to the sites. So it's not a conventional retail use in the way that a Tesco's or a WH Smith's or a Boots would be, where members of the passing public walk in, buy whatever they want and walk off. It's a completely different organisation to that. So it's in terms of a use class, it sits in its own use. So planning permission will be required to go from a builder's merchant to any other use. So it doesn't neatly fit in a retail, it doesn't neatly fit in a B8 storage and distribution use, it's both, so therefore it's what we call a sui generis use, to use the Latin term. Was there a request for an ACV, which is an asset of community value designation? To my understanding, no, there wasn't. I wasn't contacted by our officers in that respect. There hasn't been that request made. And if that request was made, it wouldn't necessarily have prevented the change of use from occurring. What it would have potentially have done is halt a sale of the property whilst the community group got together and tried to buy the site. But I don't believe that appetite exists, and certainly that approach hasn't been made of the council. There was also a question about Bury Town Council and their interest in the site. I would just point members to their comment in the committee papers, which is to not object to the application for change of use, so that they didn't show an interest in operating the site for a continued leisure use. So in terms of also the marketing campaign, I was asked to clarify reasons for not taking the site. I think the planning agent covered that in his presentation. Generally that the catchment was too small. The swimming pool was quite costly, and none of the operators could make it financially viable to fit their own models. And also, it was pointed out that I did say that the existing use was not in line with policy, because it's not a employment use, it's not a leisure use, it's not a recreational use. So therefore, can members generate a reason for refusal based on that? What I would say to that is, yes, it's not in line with policy as a direct consideration. It's a use in its own right, and policies mitigate against it. But what all the policies do allow is for the site to be marketed. And if the marketing is adhered to and is considered reasonable, then the policies allow this type of use to move into this type of site. So after marketing, it does then become compliant with policy. So it only starts off as contrary to policy. The marketing then brings it back into line with policy, and that's why we're recommending approval to you this morning, Chair. Why did Sports Direct leave? We don't know the reason for that. What we do know is no more than you members know that was speculated on social media and in the press at the time. But they did leave very quickly and abruptly without notice to their users. But we don't know whether that was for their own financial reasons or whether they had a difficult relationship with the landowner. We just do not know the real reason for that. So we can't clarify that for you members. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Councillor Ball, please.
Thank you, Chair. With a very heavy heart, because as I think Councillor Sarah said, it's a heart over common sense here. I'd like to propose this. I think it's really sad we're losing it, but I can't really see what the alternative is. So I would like to propose approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Is that seconded, please? I've got Councillor Taylor. Were you going to make a comment just before I come to you, Councillor Chester?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Yes, I'd like to speak, if I may.
But as a seconder?
No.
Well, can I just go to Councillor Chester first? I'll come back to you. Councillor Chester, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, reluctantly, I will second the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chester. Councillor Taylor, please.
I was just to ask first of all, a question. How old is the actual pool? I've spent many years sort of trying to keep swimming pools open in a previous life. And I think the easy option here is to just close a swimming pool and turn it into a, builder's merchants or whatever. I don't think that's just right though. When it's very difficult that we start to get into the realms of, as a council, our responsibility, but there is just something that just doesn't stick with me to turn what I would believe is a functional swimming pool into a builder's merchant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor David Smith, please.
Yeah, just a quick one, just a bit of clarification. I think you mentioned that there was no community interest in taking over the facility. Are you equating that with no community, it's no longer required? Is that what you're saying? Because the community didn't come forward with a proposal, that the community no longer want it?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Thorndyke, please.
Thank you, Chair. Noting Councillor London's comment that he opened with on I think it was his second time round, reference what status this committee has legally, I think we need to sort of look at the application we've got in front of us. We are wandering too far off into the provision of leisure. That is not part of the application. And we are going to finish up with a problem if we carry on in the same vein. Yes, Moreton Hall desperately needs some more leisure. It's needed it for a long, long time. And with the ever-growing status of Moreton Hall and Thurston just up the road, it's surprising that somebody hasn't come up and grabbed a bit of the land that's available up there to build a full waltzing in all dancing leisure facility anyway. But maybe there's not money in it, I don't know. But we are tasked with the application we've got in front of us, and we should be looking at that. We appear to be wandering. I wonder what the feeling would be if today we had an application to take it back to being a meat processing plant, as it was back in 1984. The other thing I've got a puzzle with on the previous businesses there is that the second one that we've got in our papers comments on alterations to existing, got the wrong bit. A vehicle showroom it used to be, but I don't see where the change of use from meat processing to vehicle showroom is in the papers. Perhaps Gareth can clarify that one. But basically, we're looking at an application for a builder's yard, change of use, and we should be sticking to that. Leisure facilities should be looked at in a different place, and I don't see why they're not, because there must be one hell of a market up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorndyke. Councillor Lynch, please.
Thank you. One of the other members had a question about why they closed, and the officer didn't know the answer. They did actually release a statement explaining why they closed. I can read it out. We are really saddened to deliver this news. Despite our attempts to keep the gym trading, sadly the cost to maintain the facilities has made it impossible for us to continue. So it wasn't a dispute with the owner or anything like that.
Thank you, Councillor Lynch. Okay, I've got no members currently wishing to comment, so back to you, Gareth, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lynch, for clarifying that for us. I think I've got three further questions here. How old is the pool? We don't know precisely an answer to that, but planning permission was granted in 2000 for the facility to operate. So I would say anywhere between 20 and 25 years old, probably. And I was asked to clarify my comment on, is the facility no longer required by the community just because the marketing, or they didn't come forward with an ACV? That isn't what I meant. I think what I mean is we can't leave the premises empty in perpetuity whilst we wait for an alternative user to come forward. Our policies require a 12-month marketing campaign. That's been doubled up by the applicant to a 2-year period. So my point is that whilst there is the voice of the local community that says this facility is still needed, the marketing and the financial situation is demonstrating to us that it isn't going to come forward again. The facility has been lost, and for the last 2 years, the owner has tried to find an alternative operator, and during that marketing campaign, the only user that came forward was the builder's merchant. And finally, in terms of the planning history section of your committee report, just to point out to members that the heading of that is relevant planning history, so it's not comprehensive. If we did comprehensive planning histories, some committee reports would be incredibly long, and you don't need to know some of the planning history. But yes, the gym came into play in the year 2000, and before that it was a car showroom, and there are quite a few of those on Moreton Hall already. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Right, I'm going to put the proposal as made by Councillor Ball for approval in line with officer's recommendation, and seconded by Councillor Chester. I'm going to put that now to the committee. Could I see a show of hands in favour of approval in line with the officer's recommendation, please? Those against. And those against, please. And abstentions, please, because the maths don't add up at the moment. Okay, the maths still does not, or the math as it doesn't add up. So can I see a show of hands in favour, please, of approving the proposal? Those against, please. And abstentions, please. We've got them, committee.
Thank you, members. So that is 11 votes in favour, 2 against and 3 abstentions. So the motion is carried and planning permission is approved.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire. Thank you, everybody. And we are going to have a 5-minute comfort break. Okay, thank you very much for that. We're moving on to the land rear of 27 College Street. Before we go into the officer's presentation, could I just be certain, or not as the case may be, that there was a late paper that came out electronically yesterday, which was the background and history of planning and events at the land of the rear of 27 College Street, Bury St. Has everybody seen sight of that? Yeah, everyone comfortable that we can continue? Yeah, okay, there's no objections on that, that's fine. On that basis then, Sarah, you can begin the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So this application before you this morning is a retrospective application for a new dwelling to the rear of 27 College Street in Bury St Edmunds. As Councillor Smith has just mentioned, we have had actually two late representations, both from the lady at 25 Church Walks. One was received on Monday, which has been circulated to members and as referenced by Councillor Smith. And that does take you through a lot of information which Mrs Shaw has compiled from 2014 to 2025, everything that's happened at the site from her perspective. So I don't propose to run through that. There's nothing in there that is not otherwise covered in the committee report. It's her background and history of how we've got to where we are today, really. I also received a further representation from Mrs Shaw yesterday. This hasn't been circulated to members. It is on the website with the other planning application documents. It doesn't raise anything new that's not otherwise covered in my report. The only thing I would like to mention is there is reference to the Conservation Officer's comments which were made with the 2018 planning application and reference to her comments which were originally for a refusal of that application back then. But those comments haven't been reported in my current paper. They're not relevant to the consideration of this planning application now before you. And the current comments from the Conservation Officer are in the report at paragraph 12, and those are what are relevant for your consideration today. Okay. So I'm just going to take you quickly through the planning history because I think it's important to note sort of where we've come from. So the site was originally occupied by the East of England Cooperative Funeral Service, which has actually now relocated, I believe, to Hospital Road in 2015. And that first application there on the screen was for a change of use of that building on the site to a dwelling with some additional extensions, but that application was withdrawn. And then the first application for the dwelling on the site was in 2018, and that was for a single-storey dwelling following demolition of that existing commercial building. And that included, at that stage, also land to the rear of 26 College Street. So part of their rear garden was included within the application site for the new dwelling. And that was approved. We then had a further application in 2019, which sought to vary that original permission to exclude the basement element of that new dwelling. The dwelling has since been constructed, and members who came on the site visit on Monday will have seen that in its completed state. And since the dwelling has been completed, it's been brought to our attention that what's been built has not been built in accordance with those plans that were previously approved. And so we now have a retrospective application under Section 73A of the Planning Act to vary the approved plans to reflect what has now been built on the site. So the location plan, sorry, let me just put my laser pointer on. So the application site is in red, and we've also got land in the applicant's ownership in blue. Access to the site is off College Street, which is to the west. We've got Bridewell Lane to the west, and there are views of the dwelling across the Green King Depot site to the east. And then we've got Church Walks, which connects between College Street and Bridewell Lane to the north. This is just a snap from our GIS mapping system, the pink buildings indicating those that are listed. So just along College Street, sort of to the northwest of the site, these buildings are listed for their group value. And just an aerial view from back in 2016. So these are the buildings, the funeral parlour that was on the site. And this is the garage building, which I referenced in my papers. And then I've also just pulled out the original plans from when the funeral parlour was on the site. So it's a relatively modest building that was right in the back of the site, again with pedestrian access through from College Street. The ridge height of this building, so this main part here and here, is 3.7 metres. So this is the site plan that was originally approved, and this has not changed. The dwelling's position on the site and its overall footprint is as originally approved. It is a 2-bed dwelling with no off-street parking, as it is in a highly sustainable location, very closely linked to the town centre. The main amenity space is within the southern courtyard of the site. So I'll just take you through the elevations. What I've shown with each of these, on the top is the elevation that was approved, and on the bottom is the elevation as is now built on the site. So I'll just point out the differences for you as we go through each of those. So this is the west elevation. So this is the elevation you first see as you walk into the site from College Street. There are no changes to this elevation other than slightly different coloured door. We now have the south elevation. So this is what faces the garage building and the courtyard. And there is a change to the eastern boundary treatment. This was originally proposed to retain the existing 1.5 brick and flint wall with trellis, but that was, it fell into disrepair and had to be rebuilt. And that is now a reconstructed brick and flint wall to a height of 1.2 metres with a further trellis above to a height of 2 metres overall. You will also notice the different roof detail at the eastern end of the building. Because there is a higher eaves on the eastern end, you see this hip is a slightly shorter, and the ridge is longer because of the higher eaves detail here. You'll see that in the subsequent elevations as well. And just to note the height measurements taken. So in this case, the red line here shows from the patio level, finished patio level, which is on a level threshold with the internal finished floor level, up to the ridge level is 4.53 metres, and that is as approved. There are some courtyard elevations. These weren't actually provided as part of the previous approvals, so these are just supplementary, but again, demonstrate those height measurements that I just referred to. Then we have the east elevation. So this is the main change. It's the eaves height that is changing, originally approved at 3 metres in height, and it's been raised to 3.5 metres in height. And then finally, the north elevation. Again, you can see the slightly different roof detail at the eastern end of the building due to the higher eaves. The overall height from ground level to ridge, as shown here, is 4.65 metres. And again, that's as approved. So just take you through a few photos for those who went on the site visit. So this is the site entrance from College Street. View as you look into the site coming in, the west elevation and main entrance into the new dwelling. And a view looking back towards the site entrance. Looking northwest at the site entrance and those adjoining properties that front College Street and that are listed. And then looking south at the western end of the site, looking west within that southern courtyard. So you've got the garage building on the left there. And then looking the other way east from the southern courtyard. And then a view looking both directions along the eastern end of the site. So this is the reconstructed boundary wall with the trellis above, which adjoins the garden of 25 Church Walks. So this is looking northwest from the corner of the site, and that's 25 Church Walks just there. And that's where members visited on Monday, and you had a look from that first floor window from that property. Another view of that garden there. This is looking west along the north elevation. And again, looking west over the wall towards the rear of 26 College Street. So this is the garden that has been reduced in depth to accommodate the site of the new dwelling. And then this is the view from that first floor window of 25 Church Walks. So you can see the dwelling here and the garage building I've referenced in my report. And I've taken a couple of shots from Google Street View because it's quite helpful because you can see back into the past. So this is the view from Bridewell Lane back in 2015, and you can see the gable end of the funeral parlour building there. And then the view now from Street View last year. So you can see the hip of that eastern end of the building of the new dwelling there. So we've had no objections from any of our consultees, as is summarised in the report. We've got the Town Council who recommend approval. The local ward members are here, so I won't say anything. And then we've got a number of representations received from the local community, and those representations are again summarised in the report. So just to conclude, the principle of development has already been established through previous approvals at this site. The position on site, the footprint and the overall height of the dwelling is the same as previously approved. The impact on the conservation area and adjacent listed buildings remains acceptable. Changes made are not considered to be significant and does not materially alter the relationship of the new dwelling with those around it. There is no impact on highway safety, and approving alternative plans to reflect what has been built on the site is considered to be acceptable and in compliance with the relevant development plan policies and NPPF. The application is therefore recommended for approval as set out in the agenda papers. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. And it was remiss of me, obviously those who know Christine will recognise that she's one of our specialist conservation officers. So if there's any particular questions, then Christine will assist the officers. Right, we now turn our attention to public speaking on this application. And I've got Peter Riddington, a resident objector, and also you're speaking on behalf of fellow neighbouring objectors, Peter. Do I understand that correctly?
I'm certainly speaking on behalf of some of the objectors.
Okay, that's fine. And we've got Councillor Joe Rayner and Councillor Julia Wakelam. Welcome both. You are the ward members, and we'll speak in that capacity. And then we've got Phil Cobble, who's the agent, who will be the last to speak. So, Peter, you've got 3 minutes, sir.
Yes, it's working. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and good morning to everybody. My name is Peter Riddington. I speak against the application relating to land behind number 27 College Street. I'm a local resident and have lived in Crown Street for 15 years. By profession, I'm an architect, and I've worked mainly on the historic environment, both as an architect and as an advisor on development in particular. I've advised several of the great estates in London, including the Crown and Grosvenor estates, as well as private clients and developers. I'm a past chairman of the Bury Town Trust, and I currently advise the Bury Society on planning matters. I've objected to the development of the land to the rear of 27 College Street since the first application was made. This was largely on the grounds that the design was overdevelopment of the site and neither enhanced or preserved the town centre conservation area, nor did it preserve the setting of adjacent listed buildings in College Street. However, for good or bad, the council gave the plans permission. I followed with unease the building process, having updates from Marion Shaw of 25 Church Walks that rather concerningly seemed to suggest the building as constructed was not as the design drawings. It was not entirely a surprise when I heard that the developers actually had applied for permission to change the drawings to reflect what is built. Incidentally, this demonstrated that they accept that the building as built was not what was permitted. It seemed to me that this was potentially a precedent that could affect following developments quite unrelated to this, and additionally would in effect be a benefit for the developer when, indeed, they had transgressed. I wrote at the time, and I quote here, "There is a matter of principle here. A contentious scheme was originally permitted despite local opposition and the opposition of the conservation officer. The building as constructed failed to follow the permitted drawings and resulted in a larger building, which this application seeks to regularise with a new application. What is not clear is if it's the intention of the developer was always to construct a building which wasn't that permitted. If that is the case, then to permit the revised design would be a very dangerous precedent and could lead to further such incidents. In addition, the building is within the town centre conservation area. The Planning Act expects developments to protect or enhance the character and appearance of conservation areas. The Conservation Officer felt the original proposal failed to do this. A larger, bulkier building certainly doesn't." And that's the end of the quote. I'm not alone in this view. Other residents, the Churchgate Area Association and the Bury Society, and indeed Councillor Wakelam, also believe this to be true. Those who are most affected by the development are justifiably concerned.
Peter, I'm very sorry, but you've reached... Can you finish in one sentence?
Yeah, pretty much so, yes.
Yeah, just give you a concluding sentence.
Those who are most affected by the development are justifiably concerned that the council may allow what appears to be a benefit for the developer, which accrued from their not building what was permitted, and I urge you not to do so.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, we turn now to the ward members. I understand you coordinated your presentation, so you've got 3 minutes between you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This has been one of the most challenging and upsetting planning applications I've been involved in as a district councillor. The time frame has extended many years and the personal impact on one of our residents has been immense, which is saddening. I'm often contacted by residents who struggle to improve their homes in the conservation area, whether that be replacement windows or matching specific paint colours. So I'm quite surprised that this development could be seen as fitting in appearance and character in the core of the medieval grid. Having called in the original application at the time, requesting it to be reviewed by this committee, I question whether that original application would have been approved if a full site visit had been conducted and it heard here at this committee, and enabling you to understand the scale and impact of the compact site. This is not one resident being resistant to change, as you can see from your site visit, and section 19 of your report shows the scale of objections from local residents. We should take it seriously when a developer chooses to build beyond what is approved and then come back to seek retrospective permission, in this case having a few bites at the cherry. In my opinion, approving this revised application allows a dangerous precedent. Firstly, it sends a message of build what you like and come and get permission later. And secondly, anything goes in a conservation area. We as councillors must protect our heritage and our residents, and this application should be refused on the grounds of the negative impact on amenity and surroundings, specifically harm to neighbouring properties, poor design and character, negative impact on appearance and character. Thank you.
Haven't turned myself on. Sorry. Rookie error. I'm grateful that members of the committee have had the opportunity of viewing the site for themselves. Like Councillor Rayner, I feel that if a site visit had taken place in 2018, the original consent would not have been given. It was in the face of strong opposition from neighbours, the Churchgate Area Association, the Bury Society and the Town Council. The thing is, plans can be very deceptive, and none more so than when a building is being shoehorned into a very restricted site, as in this case. It has taken the applicant 3 attempts to produce plans which it claims now do accurately show the property is built, and that the variations are only minor. The applicant claims these variations do not increase the impact on the neighbours. The number of objections to this application show this is clearly not the case. There are no independently verified measurements before you. All those quoted in the officer's report come from the applicant. Do you, having viewed the building relative to adjoining properties, think it varies only slightly from the original approved elevations? Would you have consented this building as it is built, or is it unacceptable given its situation within the medieval grid? Has the applicant, in effect, manipulated the planning system to improve this speculative building? If you do think this, then you must refuse this application. To approve it will badly let down our residents and will only encourage others to flout planning conditions with impunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, Phil, 3 minutes for you, sir.
As you've heard, the purpose of this application is to agree amended drawings to regularise slight variations between the drawings approved under the previous planning permission and how the dwelling has been constructed. This type of application is not uncommon. It's often the case that minor changes take place during construction, and a Section 73 application to vary the approved plans is the appropriate mechanism to agree minor amendments. As a principle of residential development on the site has already been established by the 2018 permission, the consideration of this current application can only focus on whether the differences to the approved scheme and the dwelling as built have any material adverse impact on residential amenity, visual amenity, or the setting of the conservation area and nearby listed buildings. The overall design and scale of the building remains the same, whilst the height of the eaves on the east elevation has raised 0.4 metres, the ridge height of the dwelling is as approved. Therefore, when viewed from the rear garden of 25 Church Walks, which is almost 20 metres away, and other neighbouring properties, the form and profile of the dwelling is not materially different, hence why your officers have concluded that the scheme will not have any material impact on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties. The neighbour's incorrect assessment that the property is 1.5 metres too tall has inevitably coloured other comments on the scheme, but the council's enforcement team have taken their own site check dimensions and confirmed this is not the case. The only public view of the dwelling is from Bridewell Lane, where the roof of the dwelling can be glimpsed across Green King's yard. In this view, the changes to the scheme are imperceptible. In respect of heritage issues, your conservation officer is satisfied that the minor changes are not sufficiently material to have any further impact on any heritage assets. The development is not yet complete. The cycle store and bin store are still to be provided, so we are happy for these to be dealt with by a condition as suggested by your officers. It's evident from some of the objections that the concerns about this application hark back to the principle of development on the site and are critical about past decisions. However, this application does not allow the principle of development to be reconsidered. Some of the objections are based on a misunderstanding of the drawings as explained by the officer's report. I trust that the members' site visit on Monday will have helped you all to understand the context of this proposal and that you can see that the minor changes to the scheme do not adversely impact residential amenity, visual amenity, heritage assets or any other interests of acknowledged importance. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Phil. Right. Committee discussion. Councillor Waldron, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a blatant ask for forgiveness instead of permission, but we're stuck with it now. So unfortunately, I think we're going to have to accept it. So I propose approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waldron. Is that seconded, please? Councillor Whittam, please. Did you want to speak at this moment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think having seen the site and I can understand how the local residents are coming, Personally, I wouldn't have liked to have seen anything built there way back as far as the funeral parlour, but we are stuck, and that's not a material aspect now. We have a building that is very minor alterations to what was originally agreed in the last application, and I can see no reason to not approve those minor changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wisdom. Councillor London, please.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. I have two questions for officers, if I may. One, if the building as currently built was what was suggested originally, what would your pre-app advice on the building as currently built be? As in, or would the current building have been sufficient to get through a delegated approval, or is this actually a step over the line of what would have been considered appropriate by officers? And then the second question, measurements of the site have been brought up several times by different parties, and I would like to just confirm whether we have independently measured the site and independently determined the ridgeline is where we think it is.
Thank you, Councillor London. Councillor Mulmay-White, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I went on the site visit, which was very interesting. I must say, going back to 2018 does stretch my memory, but we obviously didn't go then. I cannot agree that this doesn't impact on Mrs. Shaw's property at 25. Is it 25? Standing in her garden, the bit that comes out towards her house has definitely extended beyond where it was meant to be. Can we go back to that, one of the plans that shows that? Yes, now if you look at the top, it's coming out almost over her wall, whereas the bottom, what was agreed, is back from the wall. Am I right in saying that, Sarah? Certainly when you stand in her garden, you look along the wall. What concerns me is the heavy rain we get nowadays. Quite often, gutters do overflow now because the sheer volume of water that comes down so quickly, as opposed to the soft English rain that we used to have. And therefore, if that gutter was to overspill, it would severely, it would directly go into her garden, really. Plus, when you look at the picture, or the view from her site, she has a very unattractive drain pipe absolutely opposite where her attractive sitting area is in the garden. And the window, in that aspect, looks directly through the trellising into where she may be sitting. So there is a direct impact, I feel, on her privacy in that garden. Admittedly, there may be plants growing up that trellis, which could block some of the view, but I maintain that that particular bit of, it's not the ridge height, it's the bit that comes out. Not that view, no, we want to go back to that one, yes. There's a definite difference in that roof line, and it comes further to her property than was originally planned. It does make me very unhappy. Anybody who's been a councillor for a long time knows that retrospective planning applications annoy their residents more than anything else, because you just wonder why you bother to put an application in the first place when you're allowed to build what you like to begin with and then put in an application. So I do have two objections, one on Mrs. Shaw's privacy and two to the fact that this is a retrospective planning application for something that does change the nature of that aspect of the roof going towards the property at 25 Church Walks. Thank you, Chairman. Oh, the other thing I'd like to say is there's obviously no biodiversity net gain here. There isn't a single leaf in the place, never mind any planting. So they won't be visiting this on the Hidden Gardens at Bury. And it is a great shame that, because there was quite an attractive aspect to the entrance to the old co-op, and there was definite planting and greenery there. So we've lost a bit of garden from the adjacent property, and we've lost the greenery that fronted the co-op, and we've gained some paving slabs. So all in all, very disappointing, and I really am upset.
Thank you, Councillor Malmay-White. Councillor Hood, please.
Thank you. I echo the beginning of what Councillor Waldron said about this building, but I take great exception to the fobbing off of these the changes as being slight variations and minor amendments. I think the objector spoke very eloquently about the issues, the overdevelopment, and the fact it doesn't, didn't comply with what was permitted. And I echo the fact that there's a net biodiversity loss. So we are supposed to be guardians of our conservation areas. We are supposed to be representing our residents. Our residents have objected to the variations here. And I think we have to be very, very careful not to set a precedent. And it's not difficult to build in line with what has been permitted. And it's clear that because this is a retrospective application, that this wasn't permitted. And I think if we allow ourselves to be fobbed off with descriptions such as minor amendments and no material impact, we're not doing our job. And so I'm very unimpressed with the this application, and that's what I'd like to reflect on. That there was permission. It's not been built to what was granted. This is a very, very important area, and we should be protective of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hood. Councillor Miller-Jones, please.
Thank you. I was going to ask the same question as Councillor London about what would have happened. My assumption from the officer's recommendation now is that the officers would have approved it back then, and if that is the case, then I would support this on that basis. But I just wanted to clarify that a few of the things that Councillor Malmay-White mentioned as issues of sort of impacting amenity. I understood that those things sounded like they were things that would have been the case with the original plan anyway, rather than being relevant to this application. So just wanted to clarify that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Miller-Jones. We've got Councillor Chester, then officers will pick up where we are. Thank you. Councillor Chester.
Thank you, Chair. Severity or principle. Half-metre error, whether intentional or by error, is a big margin, and I do find that a difficult pill to swallow, actually. Going back to the late submission from yesterday, can the officers confirm? I think the probably answer to this, there's nothing in there that would impact on their decision to approve. I do have a problem with this. I'll probably be voting against the officer recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chester. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. So Councillor London first asked about whether if this building as now built when originally presented, would it have been supported? I think it was approved in its original form back in 2018. It was in accordance with our policies then. Our policies are the same as they were then as they are now. And we've assessed the proposal as it's now currently built and proposed, and it remains acceptable. So I don't see that we would have made any different decision had this been proposed originally. In terms of the measurements, they haven't been independently verified outside of the council. I've referenced at paragraph 44 that our enforcement team did go out and take measurements to check what was built and shown on the plans did reflect what was actually built on the site, and we were satisfied that that was acceptable. What have we got? Yeah, so just in terms of the gutter at the eastern end of the building and how it relates to obviously being quite close to that boundary, looking at the plans, I mean, the footprint of the building is as approved. The guttering does come close to the boundary, but it doesn't overhang it. There is guttering along that eaves line on the eastern elevation, and we've not detected any discrepancies from what was originally approved and now has been built on the site. You can see from the plans it doesn't overhang that boundary, so the guttering should be sufficient to deal with any water from that hip end of that roof. The window at that end serves a bedroom, and it is in the position that was originally approved, and that amenity impact was assessed back in 2018 to be acceptable. That relationship between the property and the neighbour has not changed, so that relationship remains acceptable in our view and in accordance with policy. Just in response to Councillor Chester, there's been nothing in the representations received from the last few days that would make us change our recommendation or view in this respect. So I think that was everything.
Just, I think, a couple of points I wanted to clarify to help members as they move forward in their debate. It's been touched on. There are some points that have come out that I just need to clarify those elements that you need to be focusing on when you're considering these changes. So the fact that it is retrospective, whilst I understand that it is troublesome to people and it is something that commonly comes up as a concern, this is a system within which we operate. People are allowed to apply for things retrospectively, and we can't, that in itself cannot be a reason as you consider this application in terms of its acceptability. Similarly, in terms of precedent is very rarely a key argument in planning because we're required to assess each case on its own merits. And particularly if you're thinking about the precedent of people applying retrospectively, that exists in the system. So that in itself, again, it's not something that members should be thinking of as a reason. Similarly, whilst I note the concerns about biodiversity, and obviously things have changed in the legislation since the time this original application was considered, that again wouldn't be relevant for members now. It really is focusing on what has changed since that approval and whether or not members are satisfied that the different scheme before us introduces new kind of planning harms that would lead you to take a different recommendation. So it's that difference between the approved scheme and the one between members today that we really need to focus on in terms of your final decision on this.
Thank you, officers. Councillor London, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have to admit, had I been sitting on a planning committee in 2018, I wouldn't have voted for this house. However, that is water under the bridge. And if the modifications are so minor that it wouldn't have affected that original application, and we the council have independently verified that, then I think that sort of avenue is closed, and I'd have to accept there is the principle of this house being in this position. So I will be voting to approve. However, there is one very small niggle that I still have, which is that the back wall was reduced in height from the original application. There is a bedroom window that is overlooking the garden. We stood in that garden, and there is quite a close relationship between a seating area in the garden and somebody's primary bedroom. That would have been obscured by the larger wall and is not currently obscured to the same level by the trellis work. And I'm wondering whether a condition can be put in place to reinforce that obfuscation so that those two spaces remain private and separate.
Thank you, Councillor London. Councillor Sayer, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've been following this for some time, and I'm really not happy with this minor amendment. I'm fed up with developers having their mistakes covered over. They always make these mistakes afterwards and try and rectify and get what they wanted in the first place. I don't consider this minor at all for the residents. I think echo the comment about the window in its location, the downpipe, and it isn't built as was approved. And my only other question was that originally, at the very beginning, the Conservation Officer did not approve a building here at all, and then later changed their mind. And there's been no reason why the Conservation Officer changed their mind from the original application. I'm not happy about this at all, and I echo Councillor Mardmay White's comments as well about the possibility of water from this extra bulk of this roof in the new location. I will not be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sayer. You might be called upon, Christine. I've got no other members waiting to speak, so I'm going to go to officers. Thank you. Just before I do that, you just pressed your, I think on that basis, you address the officers in terms of your question, please. Yeah.
Turn me off. Glad you hit me.
You deserved it. It's the impact of sitting next to Councillor Bull, I think.
Yeah, she's hit me. Right, can you?
We can hear you now.
Right, okay. What's niggling me is when properties are being built, surely we inspect them, don't we? Don't building control, so wouldn't they have picked up the difference in this 0.5 or not? That's just niggling me, and perhaps I shouldn't ask again. If I did, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm now going to go back to officers, please.
I'll just really quickly do Susan's question, and then Sarah will pick up those other points. We don't routinely go out and inspect every application that is being constructed. There's several thousand planning applications that would amount to. We don't necessarily know when they are being commenced unless there is a pre-commencement condition. And because of the nature of building control and the fact that there are approved inspectors who essentially operate as a separate entity, they don't necessarily come through our building control. The onus is on a person carrying out a development to comply with the plans and the conditions, and anything they do that doesn't is at their own risk. That is the system with which we operate. To some extent, we are reliant on people letting us know, and that is often what happens for larger sites that are building out over time. It's often then picked up by officers because they're routinely returning. But that is just the nature of how planning operates within the current system.
Okay, so Councillor London's point about conditioning that boundary treatment. So at the moment, we've got a 1.2 metre brick and flint wall with a trellis above to an oval height of 2 metres. So I think a 2 metre boundary treatment is appropriate for between properties because you wouldn't get overlooking ordinarily, but the trellis has gaps in it, obviously. So what we can do is condition an alternative to the trellis to prevent overlooking across the boundary of the property. That's fine. The queries of Councillor Sayer mentioned the Conservation Officer changing their mind, and I wonder if, as Christine's here, she can perhaps elaborate on how we got to where we were and approving the application. Thank you.
Yes, so going back to before the very first application came in, I had a pre-app plan sent to me which showed development only behind number 27 where the funeral parlour buildings, that area was. That seemed appropriate. So when the application came in, when I went out, what they'd actually done in the meantime was remove the fence between 26 and 27, put a fence very close to the rear of 26 and extended into the back of 26's garden. And that was my objection, was though they shouldn't have removed the boundary, they took too much land off 26, and that was the reason for my objection. Revised plans then came in, which gave 26 a larger garden, and I went back out on site and assessed it, and I then decided actually from there on in that was acceptable from my point of view. So my objection, I think it is on the website back from about 2018, but obviously since then the whole site plan changed and it's been okay from there on. So, okay.
Okay, thank you, officers. Thank you, Christine. I'm now going to put the proposal to the committee. So Councillor Waldron proposed approval in line with the officer's recommendation, and that was seconded by Councillor Whittam. Can I see a show of hands in favour of approval, please? Oh,
And subject to the condition.
yes, and subject to the condition on the trellis. Yes, thank you very much. And those against, please.
Thank you. So that's 11 votes in favour and 5 against. Motion is carried and the application is approved.
Thank you very much indeed, officers. Thank you, members. That brings the meeting to a close, but I've just got one comment to make before people